It's the man in green, Eduardo Encina. Encina. What's going on, buddy? How are you?
And they dropped this stuff right at the last minute, dude. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Great timing.
Did you have a story? Do you have to write a story right now or what?
Yeah, I just pumped out something like
You did?
quickly. And
Did you have
I was hearing Tuesday, which is kind of weird. It's kind of a weird thing to have it that late, but 8:30 start. But yeah, I kind of known a little bit of it, but still had to pump it out. So
look at this one, Sean Liston. Acknowledged. Ed. Acknowledged. Yeah, I like it. Acknowledged. Yeah, there we go.
I kind of
like that. Acknowledged. You should just get this is your own clothing company. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Yeah, but you got to say Ed. Acknowledge Ed. Acknowledge.
No, acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Acknowledged. Acknowledged.
Yeah, so the ED just needs to be capitalized, and I think it's good.
I don't know if you want to capitalize ED nowadays, buddy. That's not really a great thing. All right. So what are your initial thoughts then, man, when you hear this? I mean, obviously you said you had a little bit of an inkling, but what are the first things that come to mind when you know that, all right, hey, it's locked in. They're playing Tuesday night.
Right. Well, I think, the first thing that stands out is obviously the Lightning are a little banged up, right? So this helps them get some of those guys, the guys who aren't playing right now, some extra rest. It also gives some of the guys, this is obviously a long, grueling season. And if they're, looking forward to, a deep run, this is valuable, valuable off time. So I think that's the good part of it. The bad part of it is that, so the last game of the season's tonight. So you have Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, 4 days off, right? Which is pretty rare during at any point outside of, outside of like a Four Nations break or an All-Star game break or anything like that. Even when they have like a few days off for Christmas or for Thanksgiving, you have a couple practice days mixed in. Obviously, they will have some practice days there, but I think the biggest part is we're the Lightning are a team right now that has 11 healthy forwards and 7 healthy defensemen. So to get some of those guys back, get Luke Glendening some extra time. It doesn't look like Oliver Bjorkstrand's going to be around for at least the beginning of the playoffs. He's slated as week to week, but it just, again, like a lot of these guys are banged up already. So and we've seen it, like whether it's getting Andrei Vasilevskiy some extra days off or skates off and practice days off. I think this year more than others, they've been really cognizant of giving some guys some time. I think there was one day, I think we talked about it probably like 2 weeks after the return of the Four Nations, where all the Four Nations guys had a practice day off. We've seen Nikita Kucherov have a day off every now and again. So I think that's where the value of maybe starting a little bit later lies. Obviously, in some of these cases, the team that's, we saw with the Panthers a couple of years ago, the team that has to fight to get in, and already has that playoff mentality that, the switch has already started. Those teams sometimes have an advantage because they're already in that kind of playoff mode. So, we'll see. I mean, the Panthers on the other side, while they're going to get guys back, they're going to get, Ekblad, I think, game 2 back. They're going to, I saw somewhere that, that Tkachuk is going to be a game time decision before game 1. So, they're going to get guys back. But again, they've been resting a lot of their guys. So they're going a totally different way. Like, I think Reinhardt's taken a couple of days off. Barkov, we obviously saw, the lineup that we saw, the other night, which basically had, I think, 4 or 5 starters outside of the, the guys who weren't available missing. So, they're taking an entirely different, approach to this to get rested, where the Lightning are kind of limping into this. They need everyone to play and already have guys banged up. So, we'll see. I think that Tuesday, that's the biggest thing that sticks out to me about Tuesday.
Is that good? You think it's good?
I did. For the Lightning, I think it's good. I think that, it's weird because I feel that this team has really kind of avoided injuries for most of the season. Right. I mean, like JJ Mosier got hurt for, he was out for, I think, 8 weeks or something like that. But I think outside of that, they really haven't been, too banged up, all year long. And then all of a sudden, last 3-4 games, Darren Radish got banged up, too. He played the other night, but still, I mean, and again, it goes back to the thing that we always talk about. It's like, we never know until the end, basically, how, how much guys are really banged up. So, but there's no doubt, I do think that the Four Nations took a big toll on a lot of those guys. And it affected the Lightning line probably more than maybe a few others because there were so many guys who were involved. But yeah, I think it helps. And you know what? I mean, as sometimes it gets to a certain point where like you do need a practice day, and giving Coop and his staff a practice day I think helps too. Practice day or two, to really kind of. There's not going to be a super amount of game planning. These teams know what each other do. Right. They know each other like the back of their hand. They know, they know how Paul Maurice coaches. The Panthers know how Cooper and his staff do things and how they play. So I think it's there's not really a super amount of game planning going on. I think more the rest than anything helps out.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too, like as far as the scheduling goes, Beverly says league giving Sunday off for players to spend Easter with family. I don't know so much about that, but I am concerned about Tuesday because Earth Day. Tuesday is game one. Trying to take Earth Day shine. Our number one viewer when you're on. Shannon wants to know Earth Day. I mean,
Earth Day is also that special viewer's birthday as well. So
is it?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Well, what's funny too is that if this series goes to 7 games, Game 7 is on my 40th birthday. Sunday, May 4th. So everybody's like, "You're not going to the game." I go, "You bet your sweet ass I'm going to the game." Bro,
take Game 7 off. Just.
Can you imagine that? Ed, no, I'm not even putting it out there. I'm not even putting that negative out there. Nah. I'll walk out. I will walk onto the ice. I don't. What kind of shoes do I wear for game 1, Ed?
Well, Jay, has anyone asked you about what you were wearing the other day? I mean,
everybody. You were the first person saying, "Are you okay? You wearing brown shoes?"
Yeah, I mean, right? I actually had to pull you aside, like ask you if you're okay because you had brown shoes on, and then you had like this. I liked it. I liked the look. It was more of like a, what would you call it? It was like a blue and brown kind of, design.
Mixing it up.
Yeah, the plaid jacket that you had your turtle frame glasses on. You look like you were teaching. You look like one of those analytics guys up in the second row of the press.
You're right. Brian Breesman kept saying, "Oh, Professor Recher is here." Shannon brings up the best point. They wanted to make sure you guys could properly watch WrestleMania weekend. So we'll tell everybody now because I told somebody this story today. So a lot of people have been talking about, oh yeah, the game on Sunday. Easter. Oh, this and Easter. And all of a sudden, we're in the press box, and I look down to Ed, and I go, I don't give 2 craps. That game's at 12:30 on Sunday. And then it kind of looks, and then it kind of registered like 5 seconds in, like, oh yeah, we can watch WrestleMania. And listen, now it's starting on Tuesday, Ed, the viewing is open, buddy.
Yeah, there's a lot of options. It opens up big doors, So, yeah, I mean, even like if that's a practice day, in and out and right your store. I don't know. I mean, like, what's the preview? The pre-show is at like 4:00, but I don't know how much.
Yeah, I don't know how many. I don't know if you need 3 hours of freaking previews. That's freaking nuts. Let's see. Before we get back to everything that's going on, let's get to this real quick. Mm-hmm. Where did everything go wrong with Isaac Howard? I mean, we were talking about this for so long, and we were hoping that this is going to happen. And Ed, with the injuries now that they're dealing with, if this kid was just a little freaking more patient, like, I think he would have had a really good chance to play tonight and play in game 1 of the playoffs, man. I just, where did it all go wrong?
Yeah, so I still believe that the Lightning had a way of, having Isaac potentially play at the NHL level. I think, maybe later on, the last 2 games. I think that was actually one of their ideas. But and the way Isaac made it sound is like he wasn't asking for, immediate path. But I do think that he probably saw that he wasn't getting there. I do think that one thing that just, and this is more trying to read between the lines than necessarily anything that's anyone's said to me, is that, there is a hierarchy when it comes to, and there is a merit-based system when it comes to the Lightning and how they promote people, right? And so, having been in Syracuse and watching them and talking to the coaches there and the development people and everything like that, like, if there was only going to be one person that was going to get called up, it was probably going to be Connor Geekie at that point, right? And so I don't know if that was a factor in it, but, I mean, everyone, whether it's Nikita Kucherov, even Braden Point, Andrei Vasilevskiy, all these guys at least played a few games. Some of it wasn't long. I think Braden played like 9 games at the end of his last junior season in Red Deer. But each of them have they play games in the AHL, and I think it's a part of, we always talk about the whole mantra of the process over outcome thing, and I really think that that's a part of it. That there are there's a process, and there's certain steps that guys have to take. And I don't know what was discussed per se of like when he would be up, if he would be up. Obviously, the notion of burning a full year of his entry level deal, I think was maybe a part of it too. But at the end of the day, I guess the one thing that was, I wrote about this on Sunday, is like, I guess it's kind of frustrating from both aspects. Is that like, this is a guy who, this was the one guy you weren't going to trade at the trade deadline the past couple of years. This was the one guy that you kind of had a clear vision for, and that wasn't clear on both sides is kind of, what that path was.
Let me ask you this, Ed, because I brought this up to Double E yesterday. Do you think that this is of the same type of, maybe mismanagement is too strong of a word, but are we going down the same path with the whole Steven Stamkos thing? Not that they didn't bring him back,
right,
but the fact that there was no communication with Steven Stamkos' representatives, which, and remember, Stammer was pissed. He did not appreciate that there was a lack of dialogue between his team and Julien Brisebois. And I wonder, right, we give Julien the benefit of the doubt of the moves that he makes, which is, pretty spot on outside of the Tanner Jeannot deal. But for something like this, where it may have needed a little bit more of a careful bedside manner, a little bit more of an open and articulate and concise way of, this is the plan for you. Do you think it could be another case of Julien and company not really doing a great job of communicating where they stood with Isaac Howard and his team?
I think that's possible. I think that's a very real possibility. I mean, I know that, let's go back to, the discussion that we had with Julien back in, what was it, late January, early February, where, when Isaac Howard's name was mentioned, the initial, his initial reaction was like, hey, like, pump the brakes, let's let him play his season out, right, before we even think about that. And I can see that being the same way. I mean, like, remember, Julien was on the tarmac with Steven after Game 6 and said, we'll talk to you, right? Like, you're a priority. Now, saying that and actually, like, the process of how that negotiation goes are two different things. And obviously, I do think that with a kid like Howard, who has maybe some options, has some leverage at that point, you probably do want to be a little bit more, forthcoming with really what your plan is. But I don't necessarily think that, like, from Isaac's perspective, how could he have, he's been to the development camps, he's done this and stuff like that. And, like, yes, like, he saw a bunch of his dudes from that national development team, make jumps right away. Whether it was Logan Cooley, whether it was Frank Nazar, Ryan Leonard was on that team. He went right away to the Caps, after this season. So he's seen a lot of it. But I guess the recognition on both sides too, that, like, he didn't recognize, like, hey, they do it a little bit differently here. And knowing what their
cap situation was, right?
Yeah, right. But I do think too that we do know that Julien is very deliberate with his procedure, right? And whether that's with Steven Stamkos or Isaac Howard, I don't think he necessarily veers away from it. With Steven, it was always we'll talk at the end of the season, right? When Steven wanted to talk, well ahead of the season, the summer before that, and so, like, that part of it necessarily shouldn't be a surprise. Now, whether you should have handled, Isaac Howard a little bit differently, because, if the whole goal of all of this is to keep this team competitive year after year after year, and you see that Isaac Howard is a big part of that. I mean, not to like so much say this, but I think the Lightning saw that Steven Stamkos maybe wasn't a part of being competitive year after year after year. But if Isaac Howard, that's the guy you didn't want to trade. That was the guy who was a deal breaker when you were talking, when everyone wanted him, and, at the trade deadline, that you would think, and he's one of the guys that is going to be with the geekies and all those other guys that are going to, those 20 under those lower 20-year-old guys who are going to carry you into the next decade. You would think that, you'd have a little bit more, I don't want to say openness, but like make sure that he knows what's up,
Yeah, the worst thing in life is not knowing where you stand, whether it's a job or relationship or friendship. But now what, Ed? Like, I don't know if there's any way back.
I mean, like, I think when some of these injuries hit, some people were thinking like, hey, here's an opening. I mean, there really wasn't necessarily, because especially at least not till like the end of here, because of the cap stuff. So I mean, I guess the next question is whether he shows up to, development camp, back in July, and I think that's probably the next, if he holds out from that or isn't there, then, I think, we kind of sit here and wonder what's up. But I mean, actually before then, I mean, I think, you've really got to wonder whether they're going to trade some of his, or consider at least trading his draft rights at the draft, which is, late June, right? So, you've got to consider that if you think he's unsignable, but also, you want to, if you're going to trade him, maybe you want to trade him then, because maybe you can get more for him, because the longer you wait, the longer it gets to a point where he can become a free agent, right, at the end of next season. So it's a weird situation, and I don't know exactly where it goes next. And I'm definitely not sure if we ever see Isaac Howard in a Lightning jersey. And I think the situation is not going away per se. I think it's something we're going to be writing on for quite a while here, until it all kind of finds a resolution. But I guess the one thing for me is like, I don't understand how it got this ugly so fast.
Yeah.
Sad. Especially since, like, I was talking to Stacey Roos the other, like a couple of weeks ago in Syracuse, and he was just saying like, yeah, Isaac's done everything. He's great season. It all turned together. Everything that we've seen his development's great. So even as recent as a few weeks ago, this guy was a part of the plan. And now I think it's pretty clear that the plan moving forward might be without him.
What's the one thing that you're optimistic about when it comes to the Lightning going into the playoffs? One thing you're pessimistic about?
Ooh, I am a little concerned about the injuries. You know what I mean? Like, to be this banged up, this early on, you only know it's going to get worse. But I think, this team and the culture in this room, over the years, they're a team that battles. We know that from seeing it over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But I do. The thing that sticks out to me the most is that, more than the past few years, maybe the past 2 years or so, is that, this team, especially amongst the defensive core, they've really kind of settled in terms of being a good group that protects the middle of the ice. And they have their bad nights. There's no doubt about it. And, there's times when, they turn the puck over in their own end, they look a little panicked. But again, I think I've told you this, is like, I don't know if anyone could have predicted the impact of Ryan McDonagh being back there, and just the calm that he brings, and also what him being there allows you to do. Victor's not playing as many minutes. He's not playing as many top line matchups. Because I think for the most part, those top line matchups, if you can control them, have been Chernak for the most part. So, and it lets you kind of move down guys like Perbix and Radish, who were maybe playing a little bit higher up versus maybe where you want them to play, and they're kind of a little bit more settled in those roles. So I think obviously in the playoffs, the power plays kind of dwindle away, and sometimes the offense dwindles away. But I do think that this team has showed they can score. I think of late we've seen some really good depth scoring contributions, whether it's from guys like Gage, Geeky, some of those other guys. And I think if you thought that those guys were going to contribute at the beginning of the year, and now you see what they've done and kind of the roles they're playing, the confidence they're playing with, I think that's something that's very, very promising to see. I think they'll score, and having said it always comes, having said all that, it always comes down to, sometimes it comes down to a goaltender just having a series, right? And I still say that last year, Bobrovsky won that series for them, right? And I do think that, if Matt Dumba's backhand goes in, it's an entirely different series for him. So but I do know this. I think the Andrei Vasilevskiy that you're going to see this year is different than the one you saw the past couple of years. I think that he's in a much better mindset. He's healthy. This is something I've got coming up in a couple of days. But he talked about how a couple of years ago in the playoffs he was playing on one leg basically. And how much that hurt him, both not just physically but mentally in the postseason. Imagine being Andrei Vasilevskiy and having the skill and the ability to do what you can do in the postseason and physically not being able to do it.
Oh,
right?
God.
And so, I think he's in a much better place. Again, I think they've handled him with a lot of care in terms of giving him rest. And I think that you're in for seeing some special moments from him, whether they go one series or 4 series deep. I think that he's going to be one of those. I think we're going to see the same guy control that kind of postseason atmosphere that we saw back in 2021 and 22. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, to be honest, is I think we're going to see the Andrei Vasilevskiy of old.
5-on-5. Last year, the Lightning gave up 190 goals. This year, 141. That is an alarming difference between the two 5-on-5. Before I let you go, Ed, let us know what you got up on right now on TampaBay.com, Tampa Bay Times. And I'm sure there's some stuff on Connor Geeky in there.
You got some geeky. Got some
geeky.
Oh, I read. I will never stop writing about Connor Geeky. I think. He's such a good kid, and he's just so forthcoming with stuff. And I think he's learned a lot about, just in the past month, the way he treated the demotion to Syracuse and what he got out of it has been pretty amazing. I do have, season preview stuff coming. We've got, like I said, a story on Vasi. I was able to catch up with him on the road on the last road trip. Just kind of going a little bit into more of what this defense looks like now versus the past couple years, why they've made those tremendous strides. And like I said, a lot of it has to do with Ryan McDonough and kind of the trickle down that his return has made for the other guys too. I have something on coming up during the playoffs on Jake Guentzel, who really, guy amazingly really don't write a ton about, but all of a sudden he has 41 goals.
Quietest 41 goal season I've ever seen in my life.
He led the NHL in power play goals and everything like that. And I think you've talked to him. He's not a great quote, but I kind of went up to him about just kind of because this was kind of the playoffs were kind of his coming out party when he was a rookie, right? I mean, he had that stretch on that Penguins team that he might have been one of the best players on the ice among a bunch of great ones. So,
right.
Just for guys who are going into this thing, what's important, what's because it all changes, right? It's an entirely different atmosphere. Everything's magnified. Your mistakes are magnified. Your successes are magnified. So, I sat down a little bit and talked to him a little bit about that too. So we'll have that coming too. It all depended, on when this dang series started. I had to slide out all these stories. I thought initially it was Sunday, then it was Monday, now it's Tuesday. So I got a lot of space to kind of stagger all this stuff out.
Jeez, man, pretty wild. It's going to be nuts. I think you look at what the Lightning did to improve their roster last year and what Florida does not have compared to what they, won the cup with last year. I don't think enough is being made of the impact of Jake Guentzel and Ryan McDonough and Moser and a healthy Andrei Vasilevskiy. I feel like the Lightning somehow, some way might be flying under the radar a little bit going into this postseason. And
one thing to mention, sorry to interrupt you, Jay.
No, go ahead. You're good.
I did talk to someone who did say that the Lightning should be considered one of the sleeper teams kind of coming into the playoffs and maybe people aren't talking about. And that's because all the metrics really show that in terms of and this is kind of hockey nerd stuff a little bit, but the expected goals, the grade A's allowed and stuff like that, that since that January stretch, that what was it, 20, was it 16 games in 28 days or whatever it was, but since that point, that there's been no other team that's put up the kind of numbers that they have. So In one of my stories, I have someone saying, a pretty prominent, analytics guy saying, this is the Lightning are a team to really, other teams should really be scared of because of what they've done since that point on throughout the season.
You ready for Bo Cuppers, buddy? Are we going to a new spot? New spot? Are we getting a new spot?
What do you mean? Yeah. Oh, the Bo Kempers?
Yeah.
Well, you've been to Flanagan's? That's a good spot too.
Yeah, Flanagan's is good too.
Flanagan's a good spot too. Yeah, I don't know. There's so many spots out there. It's just a matter. 8:30 start. We're not going to be able to get anything after. But that's here.
Yeah, that's here.
Yeah, they don't have the times for. They have times for Game 3 is 1. Is that right? 1 o'clock.
Yeah. So how does that work? When do you go down? Saturday? You go Friday? Friday, obviously, right?
I'll go Friday. I got dinner. That time.
We'll do Friday night dinner with Double E. All right, brother. Ed Encina, make sure you guys subscribe. Now's the time. Now is the time. The Rays in full swing. The NFL draft right around the corner. USF doing so many great things. And Lightning postseason hockey is upon us. You want to subscribe right now to the Tampa Bay Times, tampabay.com/sports. Ed is, you just heard him. He's firing out stories. He's got stories in the chamber. He's like the smoking guns from the early 90s. He's not Bart Gunn. He's Billy Gunn, not Rockabilly, badass Billy Gunn, and also smoking guns Billy Gunn. Ed, I appreciate it. Are you going to join us tomorrow at 1 o'clock to talk some wrestling?
Yeah, man. I don't miss that.
All right, man. We'll have a full WrestleMania roundtable with Ed and David Shealy and Corey Long. If Corey can wake up from his nap in time, we'll have him on the program. Appreciate you, my brother. I'll see you, or I'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right, man. I'll see you.
Thanks, buddy.